Welcome back to the channel. Now everyone would love to get some passive income whilst they're lying on the beach. One of the most accessible ways for you to get passive income is by investing in ETFs that pay you a dividend. Now for those that don't know, dividend is basically a share in the profit. So when a company makes a profit, they can decide whether to pay a portion of that profit to their shareholders, and obviously it really depends on how many shares that you own of that company to determine how much dividends you get. It's a very similar thing in an ETF. In an ETF, it will tell you how much dividends you will get for every share that you own. So with that out of the way, here are two dividend paying ETFs that I think that you should pay close attention to. The first dividend ETF that I have here is called WisdomTree Global Quality Dividend Growth. It's a mouthful. This is an ETF that tracks high quality dividend growing companies across the global developed markets. What's even better is that it has an ESG component to it, where this ETF only invests in companies that meet WisdomTree's ESG criteria. So this EFT invests in 597 companies, so it means it's very, very well diversified, even more diversified than the S&P 500. But with most global ETFs, you find that they are majority invested in the US because the US stock market has always performed the best over the last decade. And this ETF is no different. Like most global ETFs, 52% of this ETF is invested in US companies. Now that's a little bit lower than other global ETFs that I've spoken about and other global ETFs that I've seen. It's not actually too bad. So again, because half of this ETF is invested in the US, you're really going to be relying on the US stock market doing very, very well. I really like the top 10 companies of this ETF, which represents about 33% of the ETF. So you've got companies like Apple, Rio Tinto, Microsoft, PH Group, Roche Holding, Johnson & Johnson, Coca-Cola, Anglo-American, Broadcom, LVM, Moet Hennessy, Louis Vuitton. Everybody likes Louis Vuitton and Moet. In terms of sector diversification, I'm really surprised to see technology right at the top. Technology is not really known as a space where the companies within that area like to pay dividends. They normally like to reinvest their profits back into the company to continue to innovate, to continue to grow. So it's actually quite a surprise to find a dividend paying ETF with such a high proportion of technology companies. Of course, Apple and Microsoft are very well known, and they do also pay a dividend. In terms of the fees are on the high side. I have to admit, it's 0.38%. But according to Vanguard, the industry average ETF fee is 0.24%. So it's actually even higher than the industry average. I'll do a video later on just to discuss what the impacts of fees are. But on the flip side, the dividend yield is quite high. It's at 2.66%. That is high for a dividend ETF. Its returns over the last 5 years have been nothing short of amazing. If you had invested in this ETF when it was created, you would have doubled your money over 5 years, which is insane for an ETF. Fundamentals wise, it does have a solid P ratio of 16.4A, which is way below the S&P's 500's P ratio of 24.85. Its price to book ratio is also quite solid at 5.21, but this is slightly above the S&P 500's ratio of 4.43. Here's the kicker though with this ETF. Unfortunately, they pay the dividend every 6 months. So it's a semi-annual dividend. Usually with dividends, you normally get it every quarter. If you invest in some stocks, some ETFs, you can also get them monthly. But this one is every 6 months. But the good thing on that side is it means that you're getting 6 months worth of dividends every time it hits your investing account. So the next ETF that we have on the list is one called SPDR, S&P US Dividend Aristocrats. That sounds very, very royal. This is an ETF that invests in US companies that increase their dividends every year for at least 20 consecutive years. So that also means that these companies didn't stop paying a dividend during COVID. This ETF invests in 199 companies, so it's not quite as diversified as the global ETF that we were speaking about from WisdomTree, but it is still very diversified. 199 companies as part of one investment is still quite diversified. Word of warning though, because this ETF invests in the US, the performance of this ETF really is at the mercy of how well the US stock market does. It doesn't have any other countries to bail it out. This is only focused on the US stock market. But the US stock market does have a rich history of always going up. Like they say, stonks always go up. Of course, we have dips. Of course, we have market crashes. But over a long period of time, the stock market has continued to go up. Looking at its top 10 holdings, you can see some familiar names like Exxon, Chevron, IBM, Realty Income Corp. And where this ETF differs from the global ETF is that the focus is more on financials rather than technology. Second is industrials. The other global ETF, second was industrials, but this one, the technology only represents 3% of this ETF. The fees are also high on here with a fee of 0.35%. It's like they don't want you to invest in dividend paying ETFs, and it's like they don't want you to be getting that nice dividend income, that nice passive income. The dividend yield for this ETF is also quite good, 2.2%. And they pay it to you every quarter. So that's where it differs from the global ETF. Over the last 5 years, this ETF has had a return of 11% every year on average. That is fantastic. If you can get 11% return on your money almost every year, that's great, right? Fundamental wise, it has a P ratio of 16.66, again below the S&P 500's P ratio. And its price to book ratio is even better than the global ETF with a price to book ratio of 2.60. So those are the two ETFs that I scoured to find you. What do you think of those ETFs? Let me know in the comments below. If you're already invested in one of these, if there are any other better ones that you can find, or if there are any other ones that you want me to speak about. I think I'm going to try and do this on a more regular basis, see if I can try and find more dividend paying ETFs. If you want to see more content like this, make sure to tap the subscribe button below, tap the like button so other people who like videos like this can see it, and it also helps to support the channel, and also it's free, right? It doesn't cost you anything to support my channel, especially if you like the content. It's been great speaking to you. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.